We may not be hungry tonight, but in fact we live as hungry people in a hungry world. And everyone is looking for something that will sustain and nourish life, something that will fill and satisfy. Everyone is looking for bread. The problem is not that we are hungry, but the kind of bread we eat. Perhaps we eat the bread of having to be right and get in our own way. Perhaps we eat the bread of hurt feelings and resentment and go on chewing and chewing. Sometimes, through no fault of our own and the circumstances we find ourselves in, we eat the bread of loneliness. And I suspect many of us have known that awful hunger of loneliness from time to time in our lives. I suspect many of us have eaten the bread of fear. And maybe this evening there are all sorts of things that we fear for ourselves and for our nation at present. And again, through no fault or design or will of our own, we find ourselves eating the bread of isolation. And then there are times we eat the bread of sorrow or guilt. And we've lost people we love, and we've lost friends who are very dear to us. And from time to time the memory of them pops up and we eat the bread of sorrow. Or we might eat the bread of guilt and things long ago and think, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I'd been better. Other times we eat the bread of power and control. Don't we just love having power? Don't we love just being in control? And the fear it brings if we're not going to be in control, or not going to have the power. Sometimes we eat the bread of revenge or one-upmanship and the short-lived triumph, a short-lived satisfaction as we get our revenge. You know, we eat all kinds of bread, and some of it just isn't good for us. Some of it's just poison and toxic. And the bread we eat reveals something of our attitudes and appetites. The world is full of bread, and yet far too many live hungry, empty, and searching. And on a physical level, many people this night and tomorrow and in the days to come will be hungry physically. But there's something about our appetites, what really satisfies us. And it's perishable bread that nourishes only a perishable life. It leaves us wanting more of the same. More power, more control, more possessions, more bread that makes us feel that we are secure. But not all bread sustains and grows life. Not all bread is nutritious. We know that only too well if we eat the wrong kinds of food. But we have to know, where did true bread come from? What are its ingredients? And that's what Jesus is teaching us in today's reading, the reading Christine read to us. And all these people have shown up hungry. Just the day before, Jesus fed 5,000 of them with 5 loaves and 2 fish. The next day, they show up and their first question is, "Rabbi, when did you come here?" They didn't marvel at the miracle he did yesterday, give thanks to God for the generosity, or even wonder who this itinerant rabbi is. Sounds to me they are worried they might have missed the next meal, that Jesus started without them and they are just too late. They saw nothing more than the fish and the bread. They either refused or were unable to see beyond the fish and the bread. They were only interested in their own appetites, and Jesus knows it. Truly I tell you, he says, you are looking for me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate your fill of the loaves. The people are just concerned with physical food and filling their stomachs. The people want to feed themselves with bread. Jesus wants to feed them with the living bread of God. Do not work for the food that perishes, he tells them, but for the food that endures for eternal life. I wonder what we are sowing in our lives. Are we sowing for eternal life? Or are we eating bread that will leave us hungry again tomorrow? The food that endures is Jesus himself. As John was reading from Isaiah 60, I thought just of the blessings and richness of life that follows from a life lived in tune with God. Not always, we are not exempt from life's pressures and heartaches and problems. But if we are eating the true living bread that Jesus offers, we are linked to the divine. Our spirits are linked to God himself. So here Jesus, in this 6th chapter of John, is declaring, I am the bread of life. It's one of his 7 I am sayings we find in John's Gospel. I am the bread of life. He is the bread that is broken and distributed for the life of the world. He is the bread that is broken and yet never divided. He is the bread that is eaten and yet never exhausted. When we believe in Jesus, eating and taking him into our lives, we live differently. We see ourselves and one another as persons created in the image and likeness of God, rather than as obstacles or issues to be overcome. And we trust the silence of prayer rather than the words of argument. We choose love and forgiveness rather than anger and retribution. We relate with intimacy rather than defensiveness. We listen for God's voice rather than our own. And ultimately what we're doing is we're seeking life rather than death. I'm the bread of life, Jesus tells the people. Whoever comes to me will never be hungry, and whoever believes in me will never be thirsty. And Jesus is offering the people himself. And as we are eating constantly from Jesus, the bread of life, so we can offer ourselves to others. Jesus is the imperishable bread that nourishes and sustains imperishable life. And how much we need to be nourished with Jesus, the true and living bread in our world today. And so Jesus makes us this offer, that he is the bread of life. He offers himself to us in every one of our relationships, our family, our friends, strangers, enemies, those who agree with us and those who disagree. In every situation and each day of our life, we can choose what bread we want to eat. We can choose perishable or imperishable. And as we do that, we'll also choose the life we want. I wonder what choices we'll make tomorrow and the next day and next year. May God help us to choose Jesus, the true and living bread. Amen.